All right, time for another edition of Sharper Square. Chad Millman, CCO Action Network, all odds provided by DraftKings. You're in Vegas, and I have a feeling I know what you're going to talk about, which is something friends and I have discussed doing over the next 6 to 8 weeks, which is the giant eyeball in the sky, the sphere. And you went to it and watched the U2 show, right?
I did, and I got to tell you, it was everything everybody says. It is worth any amount of hassle to do it. You're talking to friends about doing it. I went with friends last night. Obviously, the NFL is a crazy busy time. For me, it's a crazy busy time for you. I went with a buddy who also covers the NFL for ESPN and another friend of ours. And it's one of those things, you can probably appreciate this. We all love you. The three of us love you too. And we had talked during the summer, we're going to go, we're going to get tickets. And then you start to realize the season's coming up. It's impossible to find a 24-hour window where you can fly from the East Coast to the West Coast and do this. And we get lazy, and one of the guys has 2 kids under 5. And so it's just and then all of a sudden the videos started coming out from the Sphere. And we were like, what are we doing? Why? Any amount of hassle will be worth it. And it is incredibly painful and entirely worth it. It is astonishing. It's tremendous.
So basically what you're seeing, it looks live. It's not, but it's a look live concert.
Well, no, they're there. I mean, they're playing, but the backdrop is this kaleidoscope of images that ranges from this crazy Elvis collage that plays behind even better than the real thing, their song. And then they get to Where the Streets Have No Name, and it turns into complete desert Nevada landscape. And it goes like that up and down sort of the visual cues throughout the entire show. And it's mostly their Achtung Baby album. There's a little bit of rattle and hum in there. And then in the end, they play off with the hits. And look, they know what they're doing. What's interesting to me, if we want to get into the weeds on U2 here, they highlight the Edge and his guitar playing visually so much in this show on 20-story screens, and it is incredible to watch. I can't recommend it enough if you can get there.
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought U2, this was my perception of what the Sphere was. U2 performed for 2 weeks. They taped it, and then they weren't going to stay there forever, and you'd get a tape of it.
Well, look, I think what they do, and I've got some inside intel on this, is they will fly in on Wednesdays from LA, leave Wednesday night, come back Friday, stay Friday, Saturday, leave back to LA after that. So they're not always here, but for the shows, they are coming in.
That's exciting. And then you're doing the NBA in-season tournament tonight.
NBA in-season tournament. As soon as we're done, I'm going to head over to T-Mobile and watch a couple of semifinal games. It's going to be awesome.
All right, let's start sharp square. So let's go underdogs first. I'm prone to like underdogs. Saints are all beat up. You got a new coaching staff with the Panthers trying to impress the owner, who's an impulsive, impatient man. Saints have been an underachieving team all year. I'm going to take Bryce Young +5 against the division rival, sharp or square.
Totally sharp play. This one has been moving. Colin, this line opened at 6.5 on Sunday. Wise guys immediately started betting it. By Monday morning, it's down to 5, right? And look, nobody thinks the Saints are what the Saints were expected to be in the beginning of the year. Jameis Winston, he's 8-19 against the spread as a favorite in his career. Dennis Allen, one of the most unprofitable coaches against the spread in his tenure of the past 20 years. They're 1-9 this year as a favorite. Meanwhile, the Panthers defense has been improving. They got J.C. Horn back last week. He is a difference maker in the backfield, defensive backfield. And the Saints just haven't been very good. Everyone talks about their defense. Defense is 30th in EPA per play in the past 6 weeks. So not a good spot for the Saints, and that's why the wise guys are playing them.
All right, Denver +3. last week against a really, really well-coached defense, they got turnover prone, but the previous 4 to 5 weeks, they weren't. There are limitations to the offense, but they're not a turnover-heavy offense. They were last week on the road. The Chargers don't create turnovers. I thought their performance against New England was staggeringly bad. Shockingly. It's as if the locker room quit, but the Patriots were so bad they still couldn't beat them. I would take the Broncos in a rivalry game here, +3, sharp or square.
Yeah, definitely the sharp side. Nobody likes to bet the Chargers as favorites. Even last week, the wise guys were betting the Patriots, and they got, unfortunately, it was basically a bad beat. It was a baseball score of 6-0, and the line started at 6 and moved down a little bit. Similar here. Like, we're talking about a division underdog. Last 5 years, they cover 57% of the spread, 50% of the time when they are the road dog. The Broncos, last week aside, they had their moments. They had a shot to cover and win against the Texans, even playing terribly. So now they're getting a much better coach in a smash spot for the wise guys. They are on the Broncos.
Seahawks +10.5 at the Niners. Philadelphia's that win is impressive. As we've often talked about, after a great win, teams pull back. Seattle at 6-6, and the Rams are coming hard, desperate. I'm not a Geno Smith fan, but there's weapons here. This is a rivalry game. It's the season for Seattle. I thought this was one of my favorite picks on the board, sharp or square.
Totally sharp. What's interesting here is this number, it's kind of stabilized. On Sunday night, opened about 12 and a half, 13. Immediately, that number got bet down. And you do have a lot of things here. Look, it is as high as it gets on the Niners right now, right? Their 4-game win streak. When Debo and Trent Williams are playing, they are 9-0. They are beating teams by 3 touchdowns. When that duo is on the field, Brock Purdy looks invincible when those guys are playing and he has those weapons. Here's the challenge. They are coming off that Eagles win. That's why the number opened so high. That's why the wise guys immediately bet it down to 10.5. Again, road dogs in the division the past 5 years, 57% against the spread. You're playing with fire because we do have a lot of evidence how good the Niners have been. But as a professional bettor, you have to take the Seahawks in this spot. The precedent will tell you long-term that is a value play.
Okay, so I've had this theory that if you don't have a quarterback on your roster that can duplicate to some degree Lamar Jackson and you're an NFC team, you're screwed going to Baltimore. Seattle got buried. Detroit got buried. Matt Stafford is going to get buried. The Rams have been doing it. They face some backup quarterbacks, some pretty lousy defenses. They've been at home. Rough spot for an NFC, traveling to a different time zone, early game. I love the line at -7. Don't love it as much at -7.5. But Baltimore's done this time and time again as a home favorite against West Coast teams. Ravens -7.5, sharp or square.
Well, at 7.5, it's square. At 7, it's neutral. There's no huge consensus here. The Rams are getting played at 7.5. There's a couple things that are tempting the wise guys. 7.5 is just a huge number, right? You can easily see the Rams are down by 2 touchdowns. Game is out of reach. They got 2 minutes left. Sean McVay is not going to take his foot off the gas. Matthew Stafford in that spot can wing it, find his receivers. The Ravens are playing a little bit more lax, and they cover the back door at 7.5 because, you got the hook. At 7, it's a little bit more cautious for the wise guys. There's one factor here. Lamar Jackson, as a favorite of more than 3, is not very good. 21-31 against the spread. And Lamar Jackson is a favorite of more than 3 at home. Not very good. John Harbaugh, historically incredibly profitable. Not very good as a favorite of more than 3 at home. So this is not a great spot for the Ravens. However, they have been turning it around a little bit this year. That Colts game, I think, was an anomaly. We saw it with the Seahawks. We saw it with the Lions. But don't forget, those games were under a touchdown. So you're playing with fire if you're going to take 7.5.
One of my favorite lines of the week. Now, the line's gotten a little out of hand, but Cleveland -3.5. So Christian Kirk surgery out, Trevor Lawrence out, CJ Beathard against one of the best defenses in 10 years, and the Cleveland defense much better at home. If you watch the Browns-Rams game, Joe Flacco was good, shockingly good. Offensive coaches taking backup quarterbacks this year, and I can give you 6. It's worked quickly. Kevin O'Connell-Dobbs worked quickly. I'm going to take the Browns to cover. I think it's a blowout. I think they blow out a Jags team. CJ Beathard is a borderline NFL guy, sharp or square.
Well, it's sharp, and that's why the number has moved so aggressively. Like, it moved, obviously, when the Trevor Lawrence injury happened, and, now knowing it's going to be CJ Beathard. But don't forget, you've lost Christian Kirk. You've lost Cam Robinson. They've lost people on defense, which was already a bad secondary. Now you're going to have a massive amount of wind and rain in a game that is going to be very, very ugly. This defense for the Browns is different at home. 10 points per game at home, 30 points per game on the road. They are relatively healthy. Forget about Joe Flacco for a second. You're just talking about the advantages that Cleveland has as a defensive unit playing against a litany of backups for the Jags. So the wise guys have continued to play this, and they're still playing it at 3.5.
Another damaging story comes out about Sean McDermott, how one of his coaches got a truck paid for by players. It's just bad PR. End of last season to now with the Bills. Kansas City lost to a really red-hot Jordan Love. I think the Packers now are playing really good. I think they were a bad PI miss by the officials from scoring a tying touchdown. So I think we're overplaying, because it was a wildly popular game and highly viewed. We're overplaying the problems with the Chiefs. They are favored by only 1.5 against the Bills, who I just think, going back to last year's playoff game, are a bit of a mess inside the walls of that organization. I'll take Kansas City to cover, sharp or square.
Well, look, the line has moved in the Bills' direction before this story that you're referring to came out. And this line opened at 3, immediately got bet down to 2.5, then 2, then 1.5, some places 1, which to me is insane. And I think it is a huge overreaction to the troubles that Kansas City has had, like you said, and also an overreaction to the Bills being competitive against the Eagles, losing a really bad game, having the week off, and now needing to win this game to get to the playoffs. Haven't the Bills been desperate for like a month, and it hasn't mattered, right? So why is this game going to be any different? And to your point about Patrick Mahomes, look, I bet the Packers +6 last week on Monday night, and there is nothing that feels worse than having the team that is playing against Patrick Mahomes when Patrick Mahomes has the ball at the end of the game. And look, he made a bad pass. He got beat on that interception, but you're right. 1 PI away from probably getting to the end zone and making that a 27-27 game. I don't want to bet against Patrick Mahomes as less than a field goal favorite in November and December when he's at home. So if you're telling me I got to get Patrick Mahomes and he's just got to win by 1 point, come on. Of course we're taking the Chiefs.
All right, it's time to talk me into this one. Eagles +3.5, despite the fact they will have played the Cowboys and the Bills and the Niners and the Cowboys again and all these tough teams, Kansas City mixed in. There is a fatigue, right? But I do think it's being overvalued. This is a good team that had won 24 of 26, cold, leading, trailing, warm, windy. They win. 3.5, divisional game. Cowboys may win, but the hook I'd take. Why isn't everybody seeing this as an obvious Eagles play?
Part of it is scheme. The Eagles have been exposed in the middle of their defense. They just can't cover. And we saw that with the 49ers. They just destroyed the Eagles with a scheme that can be very similar to what the Cowboys are trying to do, right? Mike McCarthy all year talking about playing a style of West Coast offense that he had done with the Packers. And, they're changing it up a little bit. But if you look at what Dak is doing this year, he and CeeDee Lamb are making connections, and that ability to drive the slant route and connect on that is going to be really challenging for the Eagles, especially in the middle of the defense for them. So I think that's one reason. Also, the Eagles have not been running the ball. Lane Johnson injured. I think that's a huge tell for the wise guys. But the truth is, Colin, you look at every metric. You look at number of bets. You look at amount of money. pretty split 50-50, which is why this thing has basically stayed where it is. There was the initial push, opened at 2.5. Wise guys took the 2, they took the 3, and now it's at 3.5. It hasn't gone up to 4 because everything is basically stabilized. So I think this is where it's going to be for a little while. No consensus. I'm on the Cowboys for what it's worth.
All right, finally, dumpster diving. What's the game I missed?
Well, look, we got 2 options here. One, I can't believe you didn't bring up the Bears getting 3.5.
No, that's an interesting one. So talk about that.
Like, to me, this is a no-brainer. And the Bears opened at 5. Wise guys bet it down immediately. It settled at 3.5 within about 24, 48 hours. Number one, the Bears defense has been playing really, really well the past 7 weeks compared to the Lions defense, which has been getting shredded. And they're missing McNeil in the middle of their defensive line. That is a huge impact that people who know football are talking a lot about. So now you're getting a team on the road playing in Chicago where weather is going to be a factor. Jared Goff in his career averaging less than 14 points per game when the weather is under 50 degrees against a team in Justin Fields, a lot of RPO. We've seen what they've been doing when he is on the field since his injury, a lot more running. They kept this game close against the Lions 2 weeks ago. They beat the Vikings last week. This Bears team doesn't get credit for how much more it's improved since the bye week. So the wise guys are on the Bears.
One more.
Well, you mentioned backup quarterbacks, and you talked about sort of they're getting these opportunities to shine quickly. Jake Browning did not play well in his first game against the Steelers, but he played very well in his second game against the Jags. Very accurate. Look at what this Colts team has done. Who have they beaten up? The Panthers, the Patriots. Very lucky against the Titans last week to get a win and continue this winning streak. So is this a Jake Browning spot? The wise guys think so. The wise guys have been betting this game down. The Bengals opened about 2.5. It's now down to 1. I think if you can get the Bengals as an underdog, you still take it.
Chad Millman, all odds provided by DraftKings, CCO Action Network. Enjoy NBA in-season tournament. And thanks for the update on the Sphere.
You bet, brother. I hope you make it. You got to get there.